All right, let's dive right into this explainer. For decades, you've probably heard the rumors swirling around about what the legendary inventor Nikola Tesla was actually working on at the very end of his life, right? Did he create a death ray? Did he literally figure out how to broadcast electricity through the earth? Well, today we aren't relying on rumors. We're looking strictly at the primary source documents, the actual paper trail released by the CIA and the Department of Defense. We are going to track the legendary exhibits A through Q, and what we found, honestly, changes everything.
We're actually going to kick off this investigation near the end of the timeline with a totally surprising memo from the Pentagon's Defense Intelligence Agency in 1992. Almost 50 years after Tesla died, someone requested access to his files, and the DIA's response, an absolute outright refusal. The Pentagon stated flatly that the material may have significant commercial and military value, adding bluntly that it served their agenda to just keep the files closed.
So this begs a massive question about what the government actually found in his hotel room when he died. I mean, conventional history tells us that Tesla's later years were just filled with impossible, unworkable pipe dreams. If that's true, why on earth would the highest levels of the U.S. military lock these specific files down tight in 1992, citing immense military value? To solve this mystery, let's step inside Tesla's vault. We're jumping back to January 1943, right after he passed away in New York City. Right in the middle of World War II, the U.S. government scrambled to examine his possessions. They desperately needed to see if anything in his brilliant, eccentric mind could aid the ongoing war effort. So, his papers were locked up in a Manhattan warehouse, and the Office of the Alien Property Custodian called in a heavy hitter. They brought in Dr. John G. Trump from MIT's Office of Scientific Research and Development. His job was pretty straightforward. Go through Tesla's vault and find out if there was absolutely anything the military could use to win the war, right then and there. Dr. Trump and his evaluation team combed through an absolute mountain of documents, and they ultimately isolated just 17 specific files from the vast vault. They meticulously labeled them Exhibits A through Q. These files represented a consolidated look at Tesla's late-stage, highly advanced concepts.
Which brings us to the classified exhibits themselves. Let's see exactly what was hiding inside Exhibits A through Q. These files contained a wild mix of the highly practical and the totally unbelievable. You can really grasp the sheer scale of Tesla's ambition just by looking at his concepts. He wrote about Van de Graaff-style electrostatic generators capable of handling 30 million volts. He detailed systems of fluid propulsion, which Dr. Trump actually noted seemed pretty practical, alongside a dynamic theory of gravity where Tesla argued against the very existence of atomic energy. But the real showstoppers were the files detailing the transmission of power through the Earth's crust. And, of course, Exhibit F, a new art of projecting concentrated non-dispersive energy, which you probably know better as the death ray.
Take Exhibit E, for instance. It detailed a concept Tesla called telegeodynamics. It was, essentially, a man-made earthquake machine. Tesla proposed bolting this electromechanical device to a rocky protuberance to send immense mechanical vibrations through the Earth's crust over massive distances. Dr. Trump, reading this in 1943, immediately labeled the scheme as completely visionary and unworkable, even noting that Westinghouse had politely rejected the idea years prior.
And this perfectly illustrates the central irony of the entire archive. On one hand, you have Dr. Trump's official civilian assessment completely dismissing Tesla's particle beam, the death ray, as totally unworkable. But on the other hand, Exhibit Q contained a literal contract showing that back in 1935, the Soviet Union's Omtor Trading Corporation had already paid Tesla a hefty $25,000 fee for those exact plants. Now in 1935, $25,000 was a small fortune. It really forces you to wonder, did foreign intelligence agencies see something in the math that the MIT assessor completely missed? Despite that initial civilian brush-off, the military steps in. The paper trail reveals a sudden, wildly aggressive shift in military interests starting in 1945. Literally just weeks after World War II ends, the Air Technical Service Command goes into overdrive. In August, they deploy a private Fitzgerald to Washington. By September, Wright Field, the absolute epicenter of Air Force R&D, is demanding photostats of specific exhibits, including the death ray and telegeodynamics files, citing national defense. By October, copies aren't enough. The Air Force goes straight through the FBI to request physical access to Tesla's actual belongings, back in that Manhattan warehouse. Now, the absolute crucial point here is this exact quote.
Brigadier General Craigie's memo to the FBI explicitly connects Tesla's supposedly unworkable ideas to active, highly classified Air Force investigations. He states, right on the record, that Tesla was well-versed in a particular field the Army Air Forces were actively studying. They weren't just collecting historical curiosities here, folks. They genuinely thought Tesla held the key to whatever they were building at the dawn of the Cold War. Naturally, this intense military obsession inevitably sparks a bureaucratic tug-of-war across the government. Fast forward to 1947. The Department of Justice, which oversaw the Office of Alien Property, realizes they never actually got their borrowed documents back. So they politely write to Wright Field asking for the return of the photostats, assuming the military was done with them. But the Air Materiel Command fired back a month later with a very firm refusal. Let's look really closely at that refusal. The Air Force, via Colonel M. Duffy, flatly declined the DOJ's request, claiming on the record that they were actively extracting valuable information from the exhibits. They promised to return them eventually, but the sheer fact that years later they were still poring over these supposedly unworkable ideas speaks volumes. It completely contradicts that initial 1943 civilian assessment that said there was nothing of value in the vault. Which brings our paper trail full circle, right back to 1992. Here, a Stark Pentagon memo officially closed the book on Exhibits A through Q. The memo confirmed they had located the files, permanently secured them, and locked them away from public view once again. Just think about that for a second. Nearly 50 years after Tesla died alone in a hotel room, his thoughts on particle beams and terrestrial resonance were still deemed too sensitive, too incredibly valuable to ever see the light of day. So, as we wrap up this explainer, we're left with this massive, documented contradiction to chew on. The civilian scientists said Tesla was just dreaming, but the military's actions, the frantic memos, the flat refusal to return the documents, the Soviet payouts, and that ultimate 1992 lockdown, they tell a completely different story. It really warrants a deeper look into what else might be hiding in those government archives, because it leaves us with one unavoidable question. If his ideas were truly unworkable, what exactly was the military still extracting from them half a century later? Thanks for joining me on this investigation, and keep questioning the history you think you know.